I guess I should say that one of the things about this flood that is so different from so many other communities that have experienced terrible floods is that it basically washed out so much of city government, county government, and also so many parts of the school district. Tell us a little bit about that.
I have to acknowledge that I came in the summer after the flood, and so my part in this has been flood recovery. And I think that the mayor absolutely set the right tone in his remarks. While we can recover from our 5 facilities, and we have recovered from that on the physical side, the emotional and the psychological side of this event still affects the community and affects our community's children and our faculty and staff. I just came from our executive council meeting, the end of the year administrative meeting, and I asked everybody if they felt a sense of anxiety come out from this recent flood event we had this last week, and every hand went up. The children of this school district and the faculty and staff of this school district are still feeling the effects of the flood, and the school district has recovered physically, but we are still in a recovery mode, working with our children and working with our faculty and staff that were affected, trying to support them.
Thank you, Doug. Can you talk about the programs that...
Hey, how you guys doing? Good. Back. Oh, I love it.
Jumpstart.
I want one.
Replacement Housing Task Force and Block by Block. What are the results of those 3 efforts?
Critical aspects of it were that all 3 of those were designed to help the victims of the flood and also the loss. And as all of us know, all of those probably at times for all of us moved too slow. We had a lot of starts and a lot of stops, and it's just, I think, the reality of a disaster like that. Having said that, there was almost $40 million of public and private money, the vast majority of it public from the federal and the state, local government, that went directly into rehabbing homes, went directly into mortgage assistance, households lost, the house was just damaged, recover from that. The other aspect of it was that we lost a lot of necessary housing in this community, and the Replacement Housing Task Force over the several years since then has been working very hard to replace that housing. And then last, I think, was Block by Block came along actually a year and a half after the recovery had started. And all it really did was try to fill some gaps where public money couldn't work. Bottom line is there were over 1,500 households impacted, and all of those processes have very, very many blocks.
Linda, we're touching a little bit about how the impact of the flood hit so many people in the community, people in their homes, businesses, etc., government. But what are you seeing today, 5 years later, the people who were affected? How is their recovery?
So much better. But unfortunately, the disaster that last week never able to fully recover from what happened. Many never will be back in homemaking programs. It's a stressful, unbelievable experience that was a lot of uncertainty. Fortunately, I'm pretty graduate and called to action. There's life again. We're such a resilient people to Cedar Valley. So we're able to pull ourselves together and move forward. But I don't want us to forget that there are still many and still are many people who will never fully feel the safety net or the stability they had the day before the flood, a week before the flood. and that we should all be very, very respectful of how everything dealt with it after the flood and how they went on with their lives. Because there was no Flood 101 manual for us or for the people calling the shots. And so I think I see much more positive than negative now. We're moving in the right direction. But I don't want to let go of all those precious people that were in our neighborhoods and businesses that really gave everything they had to stay this course and had to make tough decisions.
There's no flood manual, but people
Yes,
did
there is.
experience this, so I'm just curious on reactions you saw,
It's called the
how people
Voluntary
were
Property
responding
Acquisition
to seeing the
Handbook.
river going up again just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but you guys didn't follow a single page in it.
It's everybody a little differently. Some people deal with it better than others, but there were those that already were packing up and bringing things to higher ground. It's an instinct to survive, and now that will be in the memories of all of us, what we do when we think we're threatened again with another event of this nature.
The weeks after the flood, there was huge cleanup efforts going on downtown, but the thing that I was amazed by in talking to business people was that absolute determination from so many of them that they were going to be back.
Made decisions that made no sense from a business perspective. I mean, from a business perspective, you should close your doors or you should move away and try to start somewhere else. But there was just a core belief that even if it meant losing money, even if it meant making decisions that didn't make sense on paper, that they were going to do what it took. And people use a lot the word resilient. Resiliency to the point of not even making business sense sometimes allowed us to get to the numbers that Gary suggested, allowed us to exceed any benchmark that anybody had set out in terms of what business recovery, job recovery would be.
Gail, the work of the arts and culture in this community is ongoing and often done behind closed doors in secret because it takes a lot of work to get to the stage and to get to the exhibit. You grew closer with others leading cultural organizations through the flood, and you reached out to them recently and asked, how you doing? What did they have to say at this 5-year mark?
When I was asked to speak today, I polled my colleagues and asked, what do you remember and how are you today? First of all, I think there were 7 major cultural institutions and venues with large properties,
I gotta go get it
that they
my
held
other
that were
battery.
affected by the flood. But one comment was, we think all of them were affected by the flood. Even if you were above the water, even if you weren't, directly affected, you were affected because you were helping your colleagues and you were pulled in for space, performance space. We had an exhibition at the Museum of Art for months, over a year. They loaned us the gallery. So there was a lot of that going on where we all worked together. And Jim Kern from Bruce Moore was at my door at my home about, tomorrow, Saturday, after the crest on Friday. So they're very creative people. We're used to working with not always a lot of resources and kind of really bringing things out from, a lot of hard work and creativity, and I think that held us in good stead.
Those cultural organizations, would they say they're actually better today than they were before the flood, or are they still struggling just to keep it moving?
Everyone I heard from unanimously said they are better today and stronger. Most are larger, which is a unique thing to have happen. But when you have to rebuild from the ground up, when you're kind of out of business, you take a look at what you've got and how could it be improved since you're doing it. And we've seen the city and the county do a lot of the same thing. And so I think your cultural community is stronger today than it was before the flood.
I can still remember you sitting on our set during our flood coverage, and you saw for the first time the aerial video of the Czech Museum and Library, and her reaction was just like that, absolute disbelief, but you have really come back. Gary, I wanted to just ask, we've done really well in this city on having businesses come back, small businesses. But I remember a couple of years ago there was an effort to help some of these businesses that were still really struggling. How are these businesses doing today? Are they really establishing themselves again, or is there still a real struggle out there for quite a few of them?
There's obviously, with 1,000 businesses, there's a grab bag of extremes on how people are doing, but it remains a struggle. The average business physical loss from the flood was over $400,000. So that is a lot of debt. The average business increased their debt load over 50%. So they're still paying the price for that. That's debt that normally businesses, when we take out debt, we're doing hiring people, expanding facilities, or expanding equipment. All of this debt was brought on just to bring us close to where we were the day of the flood. So the other big concern is flood insurance. It's something that, I hate to say something about insurance people, but insurance agents, I can say after over 20 years of business, they never talk to a business owner about flood insurance. So only 12% of the businesses had any flood insurance at the time of the flood. So flood insurance has to be an intricate part of your business going forward if you're still in the flooded community. So overall, it's been 5 years. Many, many businesses have recovered from the outside look, but inside their books, a lot of debt to pay off yet.
I think after the disaster, we haven't always allowed ourselves to remember that week and really think, where was I at this exact moment? What was I feeling? Because for many people who experienced firsthand or even secondhand, it's hard, it's difficult, and it hurts. But I'm going to make you do it anyway, Doug. You were helping your wife evacuate her and her company that was flood impacted, and you were, of course, surveying the city, your city, our city. And you're up in the skywalk, and you look out, and can you share that moment for you?
You know, you're right that we don't think a lot about those until it comes to today, and I think some really poignant memories came back today that I maybe haven't thought about for years, and I'm sure everybody in the audience today has some of those same things. So I hate that we had on the street. We had 36 public artifacts that had just been put out, and we were worried that many of them may have been washed away in the flood. So I was in part keeping my eye out for those as we surveyed the damage from the skywalk. And I glanced over and saw our biggest piece, a 2-ton sculpture called Warhorse. And I thought, well, at least it's there, and it was secured. And then I did a double take and realized that it was a block away from where we had put it. And the force of the water had moved Warhorse from 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street to 3rd Avenue and 2nd Street. And it really was one of those really eye-popping moments about just how powerful the flood was. It really raised fears about if it moved a 2-ton sculpture a block, what other kind of damage are we facing, and how long is this recovery going to take?
We remember that, the video of that, and talking about that on air. But Gail, I remember when I heard, first of all, that you were going to be moving the Czech Museum, picking up the building and literally moving it to a little bit higher area that had been rebuilt or built up. I was absolutely in disbelief. How can you possibly do that? But I tell you, if you haven't been down to the, I guess we could say the new/old Czech Museum and library, you really, really should take it in, because Gail, it's a beautiful structure. You've done a great job in getting that reopened again.
I thank you for that. I think we're only one example, however, of many who have come back and reinvested. The Paramount is fabulous. The Theater Cedar Rapids is putting on more creative work and more work than they did before the flood. I think the arts and culture community has took it as a challenge. One thing I thought about is, doggone it, we're not going to let the flood win. We're going to come back. And you had to have that conviction right away, early on. And then I think for myself and for the people that I worked with and that worked with our museum, but I think all of my colleagues, you really found out what you were made of. You really had to dig down deep for everybody business owners, homeowners, you had to dig down deep and think about who am I and how am I going to react to this? How am I going to come out of this and find, I think, strength and personal power that you didn't even know you had, because you had to draw it out to come back from this. And arts and culture is good at, I think, taking a look at what's happening in a community and responding to it. There were activities, within days there were arts and culture activities going on. And it helps unite a community. It helps it remember why it exists, what its history and its values are. And I'm proud of what the arts and culture community has done. And I'm proud of what the city has done. I know it's interesting, last week, having to prepare for a flood was so ironic, and it kind of made your heart sink to see people slinging sandbags again. But we were prepared. Not just the museum, but the city was prepared. And I think in that way we're all stronger for having come back from such a disaster.
Well, we thank the three of you for joining us this morning as well. Thank you for your responses and your insight on the recovery. And we should say the recovery goes on here in Cedar Rapids. We've made so many advancements, so many efforts in making this city better than it was before the flood, but we have to remember that there are people still hurting out there. There are people who still need our prayers. They need our assistance in so many ways. So please keep them in your hearts and in your thoughts as the recovery in Cedar Rapids does continue.
Tonight at 6:30, after the 6 p.m. news, we do have a half-hour special entitled Epic Resurgence. It revisits some of those difficult memories, and it also shows how far we have come. We invite you to spend a half an hour remembering, mourning, and celebrating. Also, at a time like this, you may ask yourself, as you did 5 years ago, how can I help? Check out kcrg.com and United Way Central Iowa's website. There are nonprofits out there that need your assistance. There are people who are still hurting who could use your generosity and a helping hand.
Again, thank you all for coming. All of you watching on KCRG 9.2 at this moment, thank you for being with us this morning. And if everyone here on Mays Island could please now rise as our color guard retrieves the flag. Thank you very much for being here. Have a wonderful day.